Alright, this is a brief overview of the study guide for Unit 1. A couple things you need to know about four theories of democracy. The pluralist view, groups compete and compromise, such as interest groups, is more common today in our political system. The Marxist elite theory, business owners versus the working class. The business owners have a lot of the power because they have the money. The bureaucratic approach, those that are appointed to government positions, not necessarily the elected officials, are controlling governmental decisions. And then the majoritarian leaders are forced to follow all the wishes of the people because of the majority rule. So those people that are being elected are making decisions because the majority of people want that decision to be made. Our government was founded by different components and philosophies such as John Locke's social contract theory, telling us that everyone must give the consent to be governed. People want to be governed, and in order to do that, they have to give up some of their liberties. The highest law in the land, the supreme law in the land in the United States, is the United States Constitution. The main procedure of amending the Constitution is by proposing an amendment from 2/3 of both houses of Congress, and then 3/4 of all the state legislatures approve of it. This is a form of federalism because it is involving both the states and the federal government. The framers of the Constitution were most worried about it too strong of a national government. Again, they came from a king who was a tyrant. The difference between direct democracy and representative democracy. Direct is the citizens make all the decisions, create the laws, they all come together. In representative democracy, or a republic, officials are elected to make those decisions for the people. Here's a couple of the key terms. Again, separation of powers, division of government between the branches, and don't get that confused with checks and balances, which is a system where one branch can check over the other branch so one branch doesn't become too powerful. Federalist versus Anti-Federalist. The Federalists wanted the Constitution to be passed right away. They wrote the Federalist Papers. Anti-Federalists disapproved. They thought the national government would become too strong. They wanted their liberties protected. In the end, they agreed to pass the first 10 amendments, and then the Anti-Federalists did approve of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment leaves the rights reserved to the states. The 11th Amendment prevents lawsuits against states by its own citizens in federal court. The Supremacy Clause is found in Article 6, which says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Looking at the Constitutional Convention, you have the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. Virginia, they had their plan first because they were there first and they had time to craft this plan up. They wanted 2 houses, and because they were the bigger states, they wanted their representation in each house of Congress or the legislature to be based on population. They also had the idea for an executive and a judicial branch. New Jersey also wanted an executive branch, but they wanted multiple people so that no one person would become too strong. They also wanted a judicial branch, and in their legislative branch, they only wanted one house based on equal representation. In order to craft the Constitution, then they came to what is known as the Great Compromise. 2 houses, which they have today in Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives based on population. The Senate is equal population. The Federalist Papers were written to persuade those, especially in New York, that's where it began, to adopt the Constitution so everyone could read and understand them. The big 2 that we read, number 10 was based on factions, and that the federal government structure was set up in order to control those factions, and no one faction would become too powerful. And 51 talks about the idea of separation of powers, checks and balances. They laid this out so that people would become comfortable with the government not becoming too strong. Some more key terms: necessary and proper clause, or also known as the elastic clause. This strengthens the federal government because it allows Congress to make any laws that they feel are necessary, so more implied powers. The Commerce Clause can regulate anything with the buying and selling of services. Also strengthens the federal government, so anything that they feel has to deal with commerce, they can regulate. Reserved powers are only powers for the state governments. The Enumerated Powers, also known as the Delegated Powers, are those powers given directly to the federal government by the United States Constitution. Implied powers are looking at those delegated powers and implying that something can occur or something can be written as a law because it says it's in the delegated powers. For example, if the United States can create a currency is implied that they can have their own national bank. Prohibited powers, any powers denied to both the state and the federal government. Concurrent powers are powers that are shared by both state and federal government, for example, taxes. A mandate is a requirement a state must undertake or an activity they must do to provide a service for people. Categorical grants, it's a specific purpose. A lot of times it has strings attached. For example, we will give you money for your roads if you raise your drinking age. Another example you can think of, if you got a gift card to a specific store in the mall, you can only use it for that reason, versus block grants. It's a broad general purpose. The states kind of have some discretion. So welfare, what are you going to use it on to help people in poverty? This would be like a Visa gift card where you could use it at many stores. Fiscal federalism then just deals with money. The importance of McCall versus Maryland. The Bank of the U.S. was being taxed by Maryland because of the competition. The Supreme Court said that the federal government cannot be taxed by anyone but the federal government. This gives them the power of the national government, expands their power. They use the necessary and proper clause, or the elastic clause. Gibbons and Ogden strengthened the federal government as well. They were looking at the licenses, one issued by the state, the other issued by the federal government, and it applied the Commerce Clause here, anything dealing with the buying and selling of services or commerce, and expanded the federal government's role there. Dual federalism is like a layer cake because it's separate, they work alone. Cooperative federalism is like your marble cake, they work together to accomplish any type of tasks. The advantages of federalism then, unity amongst the country, duties can be split up, given to the states. Sometimes those ideas then are generated by the politicians that are closer to the people, and they can address unique issues throughout the country. However, there are disadvantages. Some states have unequal power, there's different policies within the different states, and interest groups tend to have some influence on the decisions that are going to be made, which can then slow down some progress. The concept of devolution in terms of federalism, the federal government decided to put more power back in the states, so then they give them power to run programs sometimes. However, though, they don't give them the funds to do so. The Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, federal mandate makes all public buildings handicap accessible. States must abide by the rules. Most of the time, this isn't unfunded, so they have to pay for it. Unfunded, again, something they have to follow no matter what, and they have to find their own funds to pay for it. Some Supreme Court cases here. U.S. Lopez, a kid brings a gun onto a school zone. They try to charge him with a federal crime, and the federal government was trying to apply the Commerce Clause, but the Supreme Court said this has nothing to do with the buying or selling of goods and services. They were overstretching their powers, and this would weaken them, the federal government. Prince versus United States, federal government cannot regulate firearm registration. That is up to the states to issue those licenses and determine if they want to have background checks. Gives more power to the states. Gonzalez with Rake, Controlled Substance Act in California and medicinal marijuana. Rake said that the government couldn't regulate this, but the Supreme Court used the Supremacy Clause, saying any federal law in the Constitution can trump the state laws. Key mandates in the Welfare Reform Act. Block grant given to states to administer welfare, so it got rid of federal welfare. There are some strings attached of who can fall under that, but the states determine how it's given. Civil Rights Act of '64 outlaws discrimination based on race, color, etc. States have to follow these requirements. They have to put in place registration, accessibility. The ADA, again, mandates facilities be accessible, unfunded. Then the Clean Air Act is controlling air pollution, also unfunded, and businesses have to follow these. That was a quick recap of Unit 1 and the study guide. Good luck.